Where do you find teachers for an art that doesn't officially exist? Where do you train agents without German spies watching from across the channel? The SOE is created, but it is an empty shell. It has a mission, but no means. The Allied generals are stumped. They need a solution, and they need it yesterday. It will not come from Oxford's halls or Sandhurst's parade grounds. It will come from a quiet, unassuming farm thousands of miles away on the other side of the Atlantic. It will come from Canada. The solution has a name, William Stevenson. To the world, he is a mild-mannered Canadian industrialist. To Churchill, and secretly to President Roosevelt, he is the man codenamed Intrepid. He is a genius, a WWI flying ace, and a global power broker. His official title is British Passport Control Officer, a laughably thin cover. His real job, to run all British intelligence operations in the Western Hemisphere. Stevenson understands the SOE's problem better than anyone. They need a school, but not in Britain. Britain is too small, too exposed, too filled with spies. Stevenson needs somewhere secure, discreet, rich in raw materials and people. A place close enough to the United States to quietly train Americans, who he knows will soon enter the war unprepared for espionage. In the winter of 1940, Stevenson approaches the Canadian government. He doesn't ask for a base, he asks for land. The site he chooses is perfect, a 200-acre farm outside Oshawa, Ontario. Unremarkable scrubby fields bordered by Lake Ontario's cold gray waves. Prime Minister Mackenzie King agrees, and on one condition: total, absolute secrecy. The public and even Parliament must never know. The RCMP will secure the perimeter, but nothing more. The project receives an intentionally forgettable name, STS-103 Special Training School 103. But the men who will pass through its gates will give it another name, a name whispered through intelligence circles for decades. Camp X in early December 1941, just as the world reels from Pearl Harbor, Camp X quietly opens. From the outside, it is nothing. Wooden barracks, a flagpole, a barbed wire fence, and the original Whitby farmhouse. It looks like a minor signaling post. Guards tell locals it's a special driver's school. That is the official lie. Inside, the reality is something else. A factory for producing the most dangerous human beings the war will ever see. The instructors are not soldiers, but killers, experts in the forbidden arts the Allied generals never imagined sanctioning. Fairbairn, in his calm British voice, stands before lumberjacks, trappers, and American college boys, and teaches them how to snap a man's neck. He teaches the tiger claw throat strike. He teaches the piano wire garrote. He teaches how to end a life without a sound. Camp X is not just training soldiers. It is untraining them, stripping away every instinct of fairness, every trace of gentlemanly combat. These men are being remade into assassins, crafted for a war fought in shadows, alleys, and locked rooms. The lessons in silent killing are not theoretical. Fairbairn demonstrates the sentry takedown. There is no such thing as a fair fight, he tells them. A fair fight is a fight you are losing. Speed, shock, and silence, and these are the commandments. He teaches the chin jab, a hand strike able to break a neck. He teaches the garrote to sever the carotid artery in seconds. And he teaches the knife, its target map, its killing angles, the silent thrust under the shoulder blade that punctures a lung and prevents a scream. This black art curriculum is so brutal and so effective that even within the Allied High Command, whispers of it cause uneasy disbelief. But killing one man is only the beginning. Camp X must train men to destroy infrastructure, to cripple the enemy's war machine. After the trainees are hardened and have proven they can kill in cold blood, they move from the black art studio to the demolition fields. If Fairbairn and Sykes are the masters of personal destruction, the demolition instructors are the masters of industrial chaos. The quiet Ontario farmland erupts with controlled explosions. Trainees are introduced to a miraculous, terrifying substance, plastic explosive, Nobel 808. The instructor, likely a former IRA sapper or Welsh miner, holds up a brick of it like soft, deadly clay. It is waterproof, you can mold it. You can drop it, you can even burn it. He lights a corner, it burns calmly. Then he inserts a small detonator. With this, it is the hand of God. The fields of Oshawa become a miniature Europe designed for destruction. They learn to blow railways, not the trains, but the curved tracks, letting weight and speed do the killing. They learn limpets for ships, swimming at night in freezing Lake Ontario to attach charges below the waterline. They learn the time pencil fuse, silent, chemical, precise. They are taught ersatz explosives, bombs made from flour, sugar, and potassium nitrate, ingredients from any village shop. A watch, a battery, a few wires become a timer. This is forbidden knowledge. The kind generals raised on cavalry charges never imagined approving. Camp X is forging a new kind of operative. Silent killer, expert burglar, demolition engineer, a hybrid terror built for total war. And the camp is beginning to attract attention. In the spring of 1942, a very special visitor arrives. He does not look like the rough-hewn trainees around him. This man is tall, aristocratic, immaculate in a Royal Navy uniform. His name is Ian Fleming. He is not here to train, but to observe, sent by Stevenson, acting for British Naval Intelligence. Fleming watches from the forest edge, cigarette holder clenched between his teeth. He watches Fairbairn teach a man to kill with a hat. He watches explosives experts turn a wine bottle into a bomb. He sees forgers create perfect Gestapo documents by lamplight. He is watching the birth of Q Branch. The real-world practice of black propaganda, assassination, sabotage, and gadgetry unfolds before him. In the mud and gun smoke of Camp X, the blueprint for James Bond is being etched into his imagination. By now, the Allied High Command is no longer skeptical. They are converts. Camp X is taking raw recruits and in 6 brutal weeks, forging the deadliest agents in the world. Reports from Europe confirm it. Sabotage, assassinations, vanished bridges, and the system works. The demolition team that arrives carries no uniforms, no unit patches, and no explanations. They wire every building, the barracks, the classrooms, the forging huts, even the black art studio. Only Hydra remains untouched, its equipment dismantled instead of destroyed. With a final controlled blast, the physical campus of the most secret school in the world disappears. The official files are destroyed. Trainees scatter into civilian life, forbidden to speak. For decades, the very existence of the camp is denied by governments on both sides of the Atlantic. But secrets have weight, and Camp X leaves a deep imprint on the post-war world. Its graduates join the newborn CIA, MI6, and the Canadian Intelligence Service. Its training manuals quietly become the foundation of modern covert operations. Fairbairn and Sykes' combat system spreads to police forces, commandos, and counter-terrorism units. Their knife remains an icon. Fleming's notes from his time at Camp X become the DNA of James Bond. Gadgets, assassinations, black ops, and global intrigue. Hydra's legacy is even larger. The radio interception techniques developed there evolve into the backbone of the Five Eyes intelligence network, the most powerful signals intelligence alliance in history. The partnership between Britain, Canada, and the United States begins at Camp X. Today, little remains on the ground where the assassins trained. A plaque, a field, a shadow. But the ideas born there, silent warfare, scientific sabotage, global intelligence sharing, continue to shape every conflict of the modern era. And yet the ghosts of Camp X are not entirely silent. Every few years, a declassified file surfaces, a mission report, a forged passport, a blurred photograph of a man in civilian clothes carrying a Fairbairn Sykes knife. Clues to a history still mostly hidden. Local residents who lived near the camp during the war recall strange memories. Gunshots at night, foreign accents on the road, soldiers practicing knife work in the woods, explosions that shook farmhouse windows. They knew something secret was happening but not what. One farmer remembered watching men crawl across his fields in the moonlight, only to vanish into the trees without a sound. Another recalled British officers visiting his barn, inspecting it as if imagining how it might look in a European village under occupation. Years later, when the truth of Camp X finally began to surface, many realized they had unknowingly lived beside one of the most important covert facilities of the war, a place shaping missions in France, Norway, Poland, Yugoslavia, and beyond. The Canadian government maintained silence for decades. Records were classified and much of the site was bulldozed. Long after the war, even intelligence officers claimed they had never heard of Camp X. It became a rumor and a ghost that veterans whispered about. But historians, journalists, and former operatives began piecing together the truth. Interviews with aging graduates confirmed details: the brutal training, the forged identities, the cyanide capsules, the explosions that could be heard for miles. Some former trainees admitted that their instructors seemed almost inhuman. Men who could kill without hesitation, who understood fear better than psychologists, and who turned ordinary recruits into silent instruments of war. Others spoke of the camaraderie, the belief that they were part of something greater than any battlefield. In Camp X, rank meant nothing. Only skill, discipline, and the ability to act without hesitation mattered. It was a democracy of danger. Many recalled the moment they were told they would be going into occupied Europe alone. No platoon, no backup, no rescue plan. Their task was simple: hurt the enemy more than you are hurt. Some never returned. Some returned, changed forever. And then there were the Wrens, the young women of Hydra. Their work, once secret, is now recognized as pivotal. Their interception and transmission of coded messages helped shorten the war, save convoys, and guide operations that reshaped Europe. Many of the Wrens were barely out of their teens, yet carried responsibilities equal to any commander. They worked through the night, deciphering fragments of signals, catching patterns others missed, and relaying information that could decide the fate of nations. Their discipline was absolute. They never spoke of their work, not even to one another. Decades later, when asked about Hydra, many simply smiled and said, "We listened." But in truth, they were the hidden ears of the Allied war machine. By the Cold War, the influence of Camp X could be seen everywhere. The CIA adopted its training doctrines. MI6 expanded its sabotage units based on its methods. Even the Israeli Mossad studied the principles refined at the camp's black art studio. The world of espionage was transforming from gentlemen spies with codebooks to ruthless operatives trained in psychological warfare, demolition, disguise, and assassination. Camp X had not just prepared for the future, it had created it. Films, novels, and pop culture absorbed the myths. James Bond became the most famous fictional echo of the camp, but dozens of lesser-known books, films, and thrillers borrowed its DNA. The gritty realism, the improvised gadgets, the silent kill strikes. Yet the real stories were far stranger than fiction. One trainee recounted a mission to steal German fuel coupons by posing as a railway clerk. Another described slipping into a Nazi barracks disguised as a janitor to plant explosives under an officer's desk. These were not the glamorous exploits of Hollywood. They were dirty, risky, improvised acts carried out by men and women who had been trained to operate with nothing but their wits, courage, and a few homemade tools. Camp X agents were taught to trust no one, not even friendly civilians. Trust got people killed. Their training emphasized observation, noting every doorway, every shadow, every stranger's face. Many kept these habits their entire lives. Some could never stop scanning crowds, sitting with their backs to walls or checking exits in restaurants. Others struggled to return to normal life, haunted by missions they could not discuss, comrades they could not mourn in public. A few eventually broke their silence late in life, speaking in measured tones about the war. Most kept their vows to the end. Their secrets died with them, buried beside unmarked contributions to victory. Today, historians still debate how many missions were carried out by Camp X graduates. Some estimate hundreds, others say thousands. The truth is likely somewhere in between. Hidden and destroyed files, coded reports, and stories never told. What is certain is that Camp X changed the course of covert warfare. Before the camp, espionage had been a gentleman's game, slow, methodical, cautious. After the camp, it became a weapon, fast, violent, psychological, and global. The camp's philosophy influenced every major intelligence conflict of the 20th century, from Berlin to Korea, from Vietnam to the shadow wars of the Middle East. Its fingerprints can be found in coups, sabotage missions, resistance movements, and counterinsurgencies worldwide. Even modern special forces, the SAS, Delta Force, JTF-2, owe parts of their doctrine to those early days in the cold mud of Ontario, where instructors taught that the human mind, properly trained, was more lethal than any firearm. Instructors emphasized improvisation. Use what you have, they said. A pen, a shoe, a belt, a lie, a smile. This mindset became central to modern intelligence operations. Agents capable of adapting instantly in hostile environments. Veterans of the camp often recalled the strange mix of brutality and brilliance. One moment they were learning how to kill a man with a thumb strike. The next, they were studying Morse code or practicing flawless German pronunciation. Every tool had value. A forged passport, a concealed blade, a radio burst signal, a memorized cover story. Trainees learned to build new identities from scratch, rehearsing personal histories so thoroughly that even they began to believe them. Some of the most effective operatives were not soldiers at all, but civilians, librarians, carpenters, linguists, actors. Camp X showed that ordinary people with the right training could become extraordinary weapons. The camp's diversity was its strength. Recruits came from around the world: Canadians, Brits, Americans, Poles, Norwegians, Dutch, French, Danes, Yugoslavs. Each brought language skills, cultural knowledge, and unique experiences the war desperately needed. This melting pot of skills created a force capable of blending into almost any European population. A Norwegian-trained agent could pass as a fisherman, a French-Canadian could join a Parisian factory crew, a Polish recruit could infiltrate a rail depot in Warsaw. The instructors pushed them relentlessly to master these identities. A single hesitation, a wrong idiom, an incorrect gesture, a misplaced accent, could expose an operative and doom an entire mission. Perfection wasn't requested, it was required. Camp X developed tests to break trainees out of their real selves. Surprise interrogations at dawn, random checkpoints set up around the grounds, instructors posing as police questioning trainees in the middle of meals or training sessions. If a trainee broke character even slightly, the instructors would tear apart their cover story and rebuild it from scratch. Those who couldn't adapt quickly enough were quietly removed from the program. Camp X did not tolerate weak links. Graduates often said that after Camp X, they no longer knew where their real identity ended and their fabricated one began. Some carried scraps of their cover personas for the rest of their lives, habits and accents that never fully faded. The psychological toll was enormous. Agents were taught to suppress fear, empathy, and hesitation. They were trained to lie with total conviction, to betray trust if necessary, to kill without remorse. Skills essential in enemy territory but devastating afterward. Yet despite the emotional strain, many remembered the camp as a place of purpose. War has a way of clarifying the world. Good versus evil, freedom versus tyranny. Camp X gave its recruits the tools to fight back in the shadows where conventional armies could not reach. The instructors themselves were often veterans of earlier conflicts: Shanghai police officers, intelligence operatives from the Great War, former guerrilla fighters. Their methods were brutal but born of experience. They had survived by doing the very things they now taught. Some of the instructors were legends in their own right. Fairbairn with his cold, methodical teachings on violence, Sykes with his elegant knife and quiet efficiency. Others remained nameless, known only by their nicknames or code numbers. Their trainees rarely learned anything about them. No backgrounds, no families, no histories. The instructors lived the same secrecy they demanded. To the recruits, they seemed like ghosts, men who existed only for war. As the war's tide began to turn in favor of the Allies, the missions assigned to Camp X operatives grew more daring. They were sent deeper behind lines into territories still loyal to the Reich, where betrayal lurked behind every friendly smile. Some agents were tasked with organizing entire resistance networks from scratch, recruiting locals, distributing weapons, and planning sabotage operations that could cripple German supply lines. These missions required not just bravery, but charisma, patience, and absolute secrecy. Others were inserted into cities crawling with Gestapo informants. They lived under false names, worked ordinary jobs by day, and carried out acts of sabotage by night, derailing trains, stealing documents, eliminating collaborators. Every day was a gamble. One operative spent months posing as a baker's apprentice, waiting for the exact moment to poison a high-ranking Nazi officer's food supply. Another infiltrated a printing shop to forge railway permits that redirected entire shipments of ammunition. These stories rarely made headlines. They were not battles with thousands of troops, but single individuals fighting alone, relying on their wits and the skills learned in the muddy fields of Ontario. Yet their impact was often larger than entire infantry divisions. A single blown bridge might delay a German advance for days. A stolen codebook could turn the tide of a naval battle. A murdered informant might save 100 resistance fighters. In the shadows, tiny acts created massive consequences. Camp X agents developed a reputation among resistance groups as the invisible ones. They appeared suddenly, bringing knowledge, supplies, radios, or explosives. They trained local fighters, executed missions, and vanished before anyone knew who they were. Some resistance fighters never learned their true names. They knew them only as the Canadian, the Englishman, or the quiet woman with the radio case. Camp X operatives valued anonymity more than recognition. As Allied forces pushed closer to Berlin, Camp X agents intensified their work. They sabotaged retreating German troops, disrupted communication lines, and prepared occupied regions for liberation. Every successful mission brought the war closer to its end. Yet even as victory approached, their work remained deadly. The Gestapo, desperate and cornered, doubled its efforts to capture spies. Entire networks were compromised. Many Camp X operatives were lost in the chaotic final months, but the legacy of their actions endured, woven into the fabric of Europe's liberation, hidden behind every broken rail line, every destroyed munitions depot, every successful uprising. The ghosts of Camp X helped crack the foundations of the Reich. When Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, many Camp X operatives were still deep behind enemy lines. Some received the news by radio in abandoned barns, forest hideouts, or cramped attic rooms where they had spent months listening for boots on the stairs. A few refused to believe the war was truly over, until Allied soldiers physically reached them. Others emerged cautiously from hiding, blending into the crowds of liberated civilians until they could safely identify themselves to advancing forces. Some were captured in the final days, when German units were acting independently and brutally. These operatives never saw peace, sacrificed in the war's last violent spasms. Their stories remain partly unknowable, buried in lost records and ruined prisons. Those who survived returned home changed. Many struggled to explain what they had done, or why they could no longer sleep peacefully. They carried secret scars, memories of close calls, betrayals, and the cold calculus of missions where one life could save thousands. Most received no medals, no parades, no public recognition. Their work was classified, their missions erased from official histories. Families often believed their loved ones had served in supply units or clerical roles, unaware of the truth. A few were quietly recruited into newly formed intelligence agencies after the war. Their experience made them invaluable as the Cold War dawned. The skills learned at Camp X, disguise, infiltration, sabotage, were suddenly in high demand once again. These veterans trained a new generation of spies, passing down the lessons forged in Europe's darkest years. Their influence flowed into the CIA's covert action units, MI6's special sections, and Canada's early intelligence capabilities. Hydra's radio technology also found new purpose. Its principles shaped early Cold War surveillance systems, long-range communications networks, and the foundations of what would eventually become the global SIGINT alliance known as Five Eyes. In this way, Camp X continued to fight long after the war. Its techniques embedded in the secret struggles between East and West, its graduates scattered through embassies, listening posts, and covert operations around the world. Yet the camp itself remained silent, its destruction ensuring that only memories and fragments of documents survived. For decades, it lived only as whispers, rumors exchanged between intelligence officers who knew better than to ask too many questions. In the 1950s, scattered veterans began meeting in private, sharing stories they had kept locked away. Many discovered, for the first time, that others understood the weight they carried, the moral compromises, the adrenaline, the fear, and the loneliness of their missions. Some began writing memoirs, though most details remained classified. Editors and governments redacted entire chapters, leaving gaps where names, locations, and operations had once been. Even so, these fragments hinted at an extraordinary hidden history. Historians grew curious. Rumors of a secret Canadian training base seemed implausible, but too many veterans mentioned it for the stories to be ignored. Slowly, researchers pieced together the puzzle from declassified files, interviews, and forgotten archives. By the 1970s, the first serious studies of Camp X appeared. They confirmed what had long been whispered. The camp had been real, its impact enormous, and its secrecy intentional. Yet many records were still missing, destroyed to protect those who lived and died there. Local residents began recalling strange wartime memories, muffled explosions at night, unfamiliar soldiers marching through the woods, and trucks coming and going at odd hours. It seemed unbelievable that an operation so large had been hidden in plain sight. Archaeologists later surveyed the land, uncovering fragments of foundations, rusted metal from demolished structures, and remnants of the old communication lines that once pulsed with the most sensitive signals of the war. Survivors who visited the site in their old age described it as hauntingly quiet. Where barracks, target ranges, and Hydra once stood, there were only trees, grass, and the faint outline of pathways long reclaimed by the earth. Some wept openly, mourning fallen comrades, lost years, and the strange sense that the world would never fully understand what they had done. Others stood silently, holding the memories inside as they always had. A few descendants of Camp X agents began pushing for recognition, arguing that the story deserved a permanent place in history. Without these secret operatives, they claimed, the war and the post-war world would have looked very different. Their efforts eventually led to the creation of a small memorial park. A single stone monument now marks the place where the world's deadliest school once operated. It stands modestly, much like the camp itself, quiet, unassuming, yet unimaginably important. Today, visitors walking through the park have little sense of the scale of what once happened there. Without the roar of explosions or the crackle of Hydra's transmitters, it is simply another peaceful patch of Canadian countryside. Yet if you listen closely, the history lingers. The wind carries faint echoes of shouted commands, the dull thud of practice charges, and the distant hum of radio waves that once carried life or death messages across oceans. Interpretive signs now provide glimpses into the past, explaining the camp's role in shaping the Special Operations Executive, the OSS, and the early CIA. They stand where the barracks once stretched, the ground still uneven from old foundations. School groups occasionally visit, teachers explaining how espionage, sabotage, and clandestine warfare helped turn the tide of World War II. The children listen wide-eyed, amazed that assassins and codebreakers once trained on this very soil. Some historians argue that Camp X should be considered one of the most important intelligence sites in North American history. Its blend of covert training and advanced signals work was decades ahead of its time. They note that without Camp X, the OSS might not have developed into a functional wartime intelligence service. Without the OSS, the CIA might have emerged far slower and far weaker in the dangerous early years of the Cold War. Others emphasize its influence on modern special operations forces. Techniques refined at Camp X, stealth infiltration, sabotage doctrine, psychological operations, are still used today by elite units around the world. Even the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife remains in production, its silhouette unchanged. It has become a symbol of special forces units, a reminder of the brutal and unromantic reality of covert warfare. For intelligence agencies, Camp X is a reminder of how innovation often comes from unlikely places. A quiet farm, a handful of instructors, a small group of determined recruits, and a mission that seemed impossible but wasn't. In recent years, declassified files have reignited public interest. Documentaries, books, and museum exhibits now tell the story that was once forbidden, ensuring the legacy of Camp X is no longer buried under secrecy and soil. Still, gaps remain. Entire missions erased, agent names missing, and operations recorded only in coded references. Some believe that the most dangerous work done by Camp X operatives will never be publicly revealed. Veterans hinted at missions deep inside occupied territories, tasks so sensitive that even their families never learned the truth. A few spoke of operations that were never officially acknowledged by any government. Researchers suspect that some of these missions involved political manipulation, early psychological warfare, or the elimination of targets whose existence remains classified. These shadows of history continue to provoke debate. What is known is that Camp X pioneered methods that intelligence communities later adopted and refined. Techniques that governments once condemned as ungentlemanly became essential tools in a world where threats no longer followed the old rules. This shift reflected the hard truth that modern conflict would be fought in alleys, back rooms, dark forests, and across radio frequencies, not just on battlefields. Camp X had recognized that truth long before most military leaders did.